What's up?
Turn off.
Turn off what?
Skype.
Okay. He's going to turn off Skype, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
For some reason, his video's not showing up on my thing. It shows that Skype's open, but not.
It shows that we're live as well. Can you guys hear me? Natalie, Oliver, Ashton, can you guys hear me? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, we're live.
Good. Now we just got to get Jeff on.
We gotta get Jeff back on here.
Okay, give us 2 seconds, everyone.
We're gonna. They can't. Oh, actually, we're gonna do this real quick. I'm gonna put.
If you can hear me. Oh, yeah, Kyle says he can hear us. All right, guys, give us just 2 more minutes to get Jeff on the line and let a few more people join.
Okay.
There we go. There he is.
Hey, hey.
All right.
Can't figure out why I can get him live, but.
Yeah. I think we got everybody. Look good on your end, Nathan.
I'm gonna do one thing real quick.
Okay.
So people can see everybody.
Thank goodness for IT people, because I don't know what to
Lord.
do.
Yeah.
I can barely sit in a chair and talk.
Yeah, it's walk and chew run gum at the same time, right?
Got to be careful, yeah. So, Nate, I'll pull from questions down here.
Sure.
Okay. You want me to intro?
Yeah, just go. I can't quite figure out all the tech, but.
All right, you
we'll
keep playing around with it. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is a really special occasion, and I wish I could take credit for this brilliant idea, but all credit goes to the man, Jeff Troesch. For those of you who have listened to the podcast or seen some of my posts on social, Jeff was and is my sports psychologist. He and I met, Jeff, I think it's got to be 10 years ago almost. And
yeah, at least.
He has helped me in so many ways on and off the track. He's a mentor, a good friend, and he reached out to me saying, Nick, I live for helping athletes, and right now I'm quarantined. He lives in San Luis Obispo. He's stuck in his room, and all he wants to do is help athletes. Well, we happen to have some athletes for you, Jeff. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm dying over here.
What did I miss?
Yeah, it's been challenging for everyone, right? And for me, I'm in front of athletes literally 7 days a week this time of year, and certainly I've got several of my athletes reaching out to do these kinds of sessions. But I'm want to help people, and I want to be in front of athletes and give them an opportunity to kind of unload what's going on and have an opportunity to chat with you as well. So looking forward to it.
For those of you who don't know me real well, I told Jeff this just a minute ago. I said, Jeff, you know me, I'm like 90% positive. I'm looking forward. I'm trying to inspire people. I'm trying to lead. But, 10% of me is scared. 10% of me is doesn't like all this unknown. It doesn't like the feeling of not being able to control the situation. And in those moments, you especially got to get an earful of my panic, and sometimes just the anxiety and the nervousness that a lot of us feel. And we called them SOS calls. And it would be 2 a.m. sometimes for poor Jeff when I'd be overseas racing. And I'd say, Jeff, help. How many SOS calls have you had in the last few weeks?
A few. It's been interesting. The immediate reaction from some of the athletes, honestly, I would say maybe a third of the reactions were. This is before it became apparent, the shelter in place and et cetera, but just the notion that their sport season was shut down.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, about a third of the people were actually feeling some relief.
Really? Wow. To the pressure that they had felt? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. As things were ramping up, and, I'm dealing with people who are trying to manage competitive anxiety and fears and those kinds of things on a day-to-day basis. And for at least some of the people, there's almost like guilt and feeling relief.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was, great athletes like yourself and people like myself, wired like we are. We have a tendency to like to be in control of things.
Yeah.
And it's the ultimate lack of control when somebody says you're done, your training shut down, or you're certainly your competition shut down. So between athletes and coaches and people affiliated in sports organization, it's been a busy time relative to dealing with that for sure.
Yeah. What's a day look like? Are you still trying to stay structured with a lot of athletes that aren't competing, or how does that work?
Yeah, for me, it's been a little bit of a like unstructured all over the place, to be
Yeah.
honest.
You like structure.
Yeah, I do. I really love structure, and so it's been a little off-putting for me, simply because I'm fortunate enough to be as busy as I am, and my calendar gets full for months in advance often, and
Yeah.
I just have a few slots every week. But and so suddenly to have my business go to a zero, it's a bit like a farmer just before harvest season, and the plague of locusts just came in, and
Oh
so
yeah.
like, wow, the harvest is gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a little bit off-putting, but like I say, athletes reaching out, coaches reaching out. What it's also provided, interestingly for me, is an opportunity to get some stuff done that I've been putting off for a long,
Good.
long time. And so, I've been personally, the same as you, the 10% fear, anxiety, whatever. But largely, what I've been able to kind of, structure this in my own mind, like an opportunity to do some things that I just haven't taken the time to do, haven't prioritized, which
Yeah.
are things that are still of interest to me. So that's keeping me busy, and I'm looking forward to just continuing to get this thing going
Good.
once
Yeah.
once we get out of this, right?
For sure. For sure. Well, I know that beyond just a source of revenue for you, of your income, it's also it's your purpose. Your purpose is helping people and specifically helping athletes. So
Yeah,
for
I
the
mean,
next,
honestly, yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead,
yeah. My,
please.
my my why is about that,
Yeah, exactly. So for the
and
next
that's
55 minutes, let's do that. I mean,
that's
if
good
there's
stuff.
one silver line, I keep saying this to everybody, as I'm on Zoom meetings or texting and phone calls, I'm like, thank goodness this is happening in the year 2020 when we have all of this incredible technology. Like
No
a
doubt,
lot of things are
no doubt.
getting shut down, but a lot of things are still humming along just fine.
Yep,
And
yep,
Run Gum's working. We got people down in the warehouse shipping product right now. I got my
awesome.
Run Gum team helping me out with this video, and it's just such a huge blessing that we're able to still reach people. So let's do
Amen.
that right now, Jeff. We got quite a few people that have tuned in to watch this, and I want to answer your questions. Jeff's going to answer your questions. This will be kind of the format. I'll read your guys' questions. If they're really training focused, I'll probably jump in and tackle that. And if they're more psychology, emotion, nerves, that kind of questions, I think we'll let the expert Jeff handle it. So let's have some questions, guys. What do you think? Nathan, I know you had one. You want to start it off?
I had a question.
Yeah, I think you had a question teed up.
Did I?
Yeah.
Nick.
Yeah. Read it off.
Well, here,
Oh,
we'll put this one in here just
yeah,
so you
that's
can see
good.
it.
Oh, wow. Way to tee it up so that people can read it. All right. But I can't read it. Can you move that screen just down a little bit? There, perfect.
Cover your face.
Captain Dinger says, I'm a senior in high school. It's looking like I'm not going to have one. I'm destroyed. I was top in the state in the 800. I don't know what to do. I just want a chance to race. The athlete in me will first of all say that the training you have put in is not going to waste, okay? All that hard work you did in the fall, all that hard work you did in the winter, those miles are in your legs and they aren't going anywhere. There will be more races, and you will be grateful that you have put in that training. As far as the disappointment goes, I really want to hear what you have to say, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is that for all athletes like this guy, there's no real happy face spin on it. I mean, it just sucks. It sucks for everybody who has put in the work, who has been dedicated, made the sacrifices, made the investment. And so, we're not going to put a happy face spin on it. What we can say is that, as you just said, there's been a foundation laid down that can be applied in the future. And that's all that any of us can really appreciate at this point, is the opportunity to apply what we've worked hard at some point in the future, and we're in this pause button. I feel as though one of the great challenges in this is that I think there's a lot of talking about, like, how do I bounce back from this? How do I come back from something like this? And I feel as though that I like looking at it a different way. There's a great book called Resilience that a guy named Eric Greitens wrote, and it's one of my favorite books. And one of the things he speaks about is about bouncing forward, and basically integrating, okay, from this moment when my 800-meter season was shut down, when my senior year was shut down, managing the loss and the grief and the stress around that. But also recognizing that we can use the strength that comes out of, like, how did I get through this time? How did I overcome this adversity? How did I build strengths in terms of mental, emotional resilience? That stuff can be applied to the 800 meters when you're a college athlete, or that can be applied to the rest of your life beyond 800 meters.
Completely.
So yeah, and so I feel
think,
like,
let me just add to that.
please.
I almost feel like these young athletes don't recognize it right now, but you and I know that what they're learning through this process is so valuable, maybe more valuable than another season of racing. The way that they're handling this appointment, the way they're handling themselves through this crisis, it's just going to be so valuable for them as older athletes in college or beyond.
Totally agree, and I completely agree with what you're saying, and it's easy to say that at times when we're maybe not feeling that same immediate pain. Like,
of course,
you're not missing out on Japan. I'm not missing out on a whole lot for a young man like this who feels like he's missing out on something, and is missing out on something that's really significant in his life in the short term. It is after the fact that we who have lived life a little longer and have had these kinds of different kinds, but certainly disappointments, and you missed an entire season.
I keep drawing on that year, 2014. Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with our listeners right now. I was suicidal that year, and I had some serious trouble getting past it. So I'm kind of imagining what that must be like for the kids right now, whether it was this young man getting ready for state or somebody maybe getting ready for the games. Fingers crossed they aren't canceled.
Right.
But yeah, when you're in the moment, it's so hard to see out of that fog. What do you tell somebody when they just, like me in 14 when I was spiraling downward, and I physically couldn't stop that downward momentum. I couldn't lift myself up to see out of the fog.
Yeah, as cliche as it is, it really comes down to is doing the best that we can to live today, kind of the one day at a time, do the best that we can to take care of what's right in front of us. And sometimes, honestly, when you're in the space like you were in 2014, it's like living minute to minute, hour to hour, right?
Yeah, I mean, day to day was it felt like a day was a month. It was so hard to get through a day.
Exactly. So it really is about what we have right now. The fact that I'm assuming this young man is still healthy and still athletic, and he still has opportunities ahead of him. I feel like there's so much attention currently, and for me too, this is a natural place to go. There's so much attention on what we've lost in this that sometimes I feel like we forget what we actually still have.
Yeah.
We forget that for many of us we still have the great fortune of being able to be on an internet call and be on YouTube. I mean,
have a plate of food in front of us.
Yeah, exactly, and a roof over our heads and whatever. And again, it's cliche, and that can kind of okay, well, that doesn't mean anything. I want to go run my race. Well, it does. It means a lot, actually, and I feel like being grateful, the whole attitude of gratitude and being appreciative for what we have, even in those days when they're the kind of darker days, and in the end, and maybe I'll wrap this with this is, in the end, it always comes down to a choice to what we give power and attention to in our minds.
Completely.
And do we give our attention and give our power to the notion that, oh, this was taken away from me, which is real and true. Do we give power and attention to that, or do we shift our attention to something which is more productive, more healthy, more effective, which is, this is what I still have, and here are the opportunities that are in front of me. I want to take full advantage of those. And those that adapt most quickly, those that are most resilient through this are going to be the ones that take advantage when things get back to whatever our new normal is.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not going to be, that kind of the trickle effect of having to dealt with this poorly. I feel like they'll be able to kind of come through this, and this 800-meter runner will be the guy that, if he manages this well internally in the short term, in the long term, he'll benefit from it.
Completely. Great advice. Nathan, you have another one teed up for us. Here we go. Everything Outdoors. Can you move that up just a little bit there? Yeah. Everything Outdoors asks, is there an acceptable level of fear and anxiety? When does fear become problematic in athletes? What a great question.
That's an awesome question. Yeah, there an acceptable level of fear. I would say absolutely. One of as Nick knows, I'm big about the words that we use and how we use them and what they depict within us. And just my own personal professional philosophy is I'm not a big fan of the phrase fearless. I frankly have never met an athlete who's fearless. I feel like if a person's fearless, that there's something frankly kind of pathological there, because I mean we have an innate survival instinct, and fear is a part of that, right? So to me, it's less about certainly it's about reducing fear, but it's less about putting our energy at reducing fear. It's more about increasing. It's more about increasing our courage and increasing our actions, our courageous actions when we're feeling fear. So when we are in a place of when we're in a place of anxiety, when we're in a place of fear, when we're in a place of this sense of a loss of control, a lot of it comes down to being more disciplined, and again, what we're putting our attention on, what our thoughts are on, but also acting courageously, acting in a way that starts to create habits that build resilience, build strength, build persistence, and those kinds of things. I feel like it's the old feel of fear and do it anyway, whatever it is that is healthy for you. And I feel like that's I don't necessarily, I wouldn't want to inject fear in, but I wouldn't say taking fear to a zero is necessary for athletes to be great.
I don't think you want it to. And I'll use my own career as an example. I remember in middle school when I had such crippling fear and anxiety that it was doing harm to me, right? Like I would think, if I twist my ankle during warm up, they won't make me run. Like that's crippling fear and anxiety. And then I remember at the end of my career, like not feeling amped up or nervous or afraid at all, and I missed it. I was like, I need those emotions, because that fear and anxiety, if you can learn to control those, that's adrenaline. Like that's pure adrenaline coursing through your veins, and adrenaline allows you to do superhuman things. And so I remember at the end of my career, drinking an energy drink. This was before Run Gun was around. Drinking an energy drink and blasting, loud music and trying to get that same feeling of fear and anxiety and nervousness, because truly you need it. So instead of worrying about that feeling of dread and anxiety, learn to work with a guy like Jeff. Learn to harness those feelings for good and put them towards running or performing at your best.
Right.
It's not easy to do. It took me a decade plus.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And you're on point that it can be debilitating. And I think the way you articulated that is extremely good. Is that the level of fear that is acceptable is the level of fear that it becomes unacceptable when it inhibits action that's healthy.
Yeah.
Right. If we start going down the path of unhealthy thoughts of like I want to snap my ankle, or unhealthy behaviors like overtraining and blowing yourself up because you're so worried about not being prepared that you over prepare, those kinds of things that create debilitating thoughts or debilitating actions. Recognize that feelings are a result of our thought process. So we're thinking about situations in a particular way, and then we feel anxiety, we feel fear, and then that elicits a certain kind of action. So whatever our emotions are, it's really about hitting it on the thought side and on the behavior side, so that we can moderate and ameliorate those kinds of emotions that may not be helpful or healthy.
Completely. Hope that helped. Nathan, what else you got for us?
A little more running.
Okay, good. Up a little bit. There we go. Dylan Rubel asks, what limitations, if any, are you placing on yourself or athletes you typically run with in regards to group runs with the current situation? That's a great question. And I know that this is changing day by day. Like I remember that last week, group sizes of 250 were totally acceptable. And now where Jeff's at, you can have a group size of 2 in your house. And it's just, it's something that we've all never dealt with. It's changing day by day. Our social norms are changing almost minute by minute. Personally, I love training by myself. So it's really easy for me to socially distance by just going for my run. But I know a lot of people, they don't have, they don't feel comfortable doing that. They don't feel safe, or they just don't enjoy doing it. I think for me personally, I think it's a great time to partner up with somebody and train. What would you say to that, Jeff? And this is more just a societal thing that we're all dealing with than necessarily an athlete or a sports psychologist question. Like in today's world, what is acceptable?
Well, I guess I'm going to always err on the side of whatever the people that are smarter than I are telling me about the virus. And if they're saying 6 feet away from everybody, then I'm going to be 6 feet away from everybody. But the other side of that is I do appreciate that some people prefer to train in groups, large groups, small groups, whatever. And certainly for some, that creates a sense of motivation or some inspiration to be alongside somebody. My own personal opinion would be to still have it be 6 feet apart. Yeah. I know, in some parts of the country that sounds like absolute craziness because it hasn't hit you there. Here where I am in the Central Coast of California, again, we're shelter in place, and it's because it's starting to explode. And I have several athletes actually that live in Italy who have been suffering through the ramifications of this. And so I guess my own personal opinion would be that whatever potential downside there is in training just with one other person 6 feet apart is going to be is going to be outweighed by the upside of minimizing your contact and the potential for us to get a virus. Because I don't know what the long-term effect of having the virus is going to be on people, but I guess I get a sense that most people can probably get whatever they need to get done in the 6 or 8 weeks that we're 6 feet apart from one another.
Yeah. You had this great post the other day, and I literally laughed. I was like 4 a.m. when I read it, and it said, our grandparents were called upon, we're called to go to war to fight on our behalf. You're called to sit on the couch for a few weeks. You can do this. And it's so true. Exactly. I mean, our generation, I think really from well, certainly my generation, we have had it so easy. It's just like we really haven't had that many hardships. I haven't fought in a war. A lot of my generation hasn't. We haven't had the cataclysmic depression, knock on wood, that's not we haven't had that since 1929. I mean, we really had it relatively easy, and I think this is our generation being tested. And how are we going to respond? I see videos of people on spring break in groups of 1,000 on a beach down in Florida drinking and yucking it up, and I'm like, I don't know if that's our generation really rising to the occasion here.
I would agree. I'm having a really hard time not being judgmental about that, to be honest. I feel as though, I whenever I do whatever I do, I do the best I can to relate to the person's experience. And I think of myself at 21 years old, how seriously would I have taken this unless it was happening right in my backyard to somebody that I knew? Probably not very seriously at 21. If I'm just being honest about me. And yet, as we grow older and we see the effect of some of these things, sometimes what we hear is actually the truth and not just a blown up spin. Yeah. And this is one of those where, I think for me, because I've spoken with people in Italy, I've spoken with people who have been in communities around the world that have been, more greatly affected than we have yet. Yeah. I'm taking it extremely seriously. I do think it's a little unfortunate that it appears as though that there are groups of younger folks who are taking it less seriously, and I feel like that may be partly because they're less inclined or less likely to be as significantly affected. If this was happening and, oh my gosh, 20-somethings are the ones most affected, would there be that many there?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there'd be all 80-year-olds at the beach. I don't know, but it's disappointing, to be honest. I mean, I guess that's the word for me, and it's just it feels a little selfish, and it feels like people aren't really thinking about others; they're just thinking about their own immediate gratification. That's disappointing.
Why don't you throw that up on the screen again, Nathan? Kim brings up a great point. So Kim Gasper says, you are a millennial that has a lot of influence on your peers. Can you please remind them that we are in serious times and the coronavirus is dangerous to all and guidelines should be followed? So I've been following this pretty closely. This is something that affects elderly disproportionately, like most viruses and diseases. But if you think that you're young and healthy and that this isn't going to affect you, you are dead wrong. Not just from a physical standpoint, and it has hospitalized people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, people under the age of 60, it has hospitalized them. But the economic impact, I mean, are you guys not watching the markets? I mean, maybe you don't have stock, maybe you don't watch the news much, but this is affecting our entire world economy. The sooner we can put an end to this, the sooner we can get back to the fun times. It's not that hard, as Jeff says. You are being called to sit on the couch. You can do this. I believe in you.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen to that. I mean, I feel like it's just a civic responsibility to step up in these kinds of times and do whatever's asked of us. And I mean, I guess it feels to me like it's not that hard. But I guess for some people it is.
I think sometimes putting a face to it really helps. I was at my local, I'm working on my pilot's license, so I was at the local flight school. And there was this old timer, and he'd built a plane, and I know him. His name's Larry, and he's 91 years old, and he still goes out and he can't fly anymore, but he goes out and hangs out at his hangar, and he's polishing up the plane, and he's just the nicest guy with the greatest stories, and he's this incredible love for life, even at 91. And I just thought to myself, Larry, I want to give you a big hug right now, but I'm gonna stay 6 feet back because I don't know who I've come in contact with in the last month, and if we lost Larry, I would be so sad. And we all have somebody like that in our lives, whether it's your grandparent or, even a parent that has a, pre-existing medical condition or somebody like Larry. We have to take care of each other. We really need to take this seriously. We really need to take care of each other. This will pass. The good times will flow again, but let's all work on this together. We can do this.
Yeah. Amen.
Nathan, what else you got? Better. Artem, I'm going to mess this one up. Artem Talanov. Nick, can you comment on what current Olympic athletes are facing with the decision to still hold the Olympics? Boy, this is a great question. I definitely want to hear Jeff's, because I know you're on the front lines with this with a lot of Olympic hopefuls, but I'm talking with coaches, and it's the uncertainty, right? Businesses love certainty, and athletes love certainty. We love a schedule. We love to know what our next workout is tomorrow and what our next race is and the race that's going to qualify us for the trials, and then when the trials are going to happen. And we build an entire year's worth of training around that schedule. And we live and die by it. I mean, our entire lives, our 24/7 life is dictated by when those meets are going to be on the calendar. And now we don't know. If it's me, if it's 2008 or if it's 2012, and I know I have a really good chance to qualify for the team, I'm putting my head in the sand and I'm pretending like everything is going to happen the way it's written on paper right now. The trials are going to happen. The games are going to happen. I am rolling with the punches. I am not letting any of this faze me. None of things stopping. In fact, I'm actually looking at it as an opportunity. I'm saying, I'll bet you this is messing up some of my competitors way more than I'm going to let it mess me up. And that's how I'm approaching it. I don't know if that's the healthiest way. I'm just saying that's how I would approach it. What do you think about that mentality, Jeff?
Well, at the risk of blowing sunshine at you, that's why you won how many national titles. That's exactly the way that we would want an athlete to think, is like until you know otherwise, you proceed with as if things are on. And a part of being a great athlete, as you know, is to learn how to minimize the distractions outside of your bubble. I mean, with this kind of a thing, really hard because there's a lot of stuff like getting in everybody's bubble. Where you just said the economic pieces just drive down the street and you can see, and not to mention the virus potential. But yeah, absolutely. It for me, it comes down to as much as physically as possible, it's business as usual in terms of training. Again, that becomes a significant challenge for some who are in a group environment and can't be in a group environment anymore. Mm-hmm. And so there's some of that going on. I mean, we're talking about an individual athlete who can go out and run or can go out and bike or whatever on his or her own. That's a bit of a different thing than somebody who's in a team environment or in an indoor environment where it's no longer available to them.
Or swimmers, most pools are shut down.
A lot of the pools are shut down. Yeah, I know. For some of the triathlons, or some of the triathletes with whom I work who aren't fortunate enough to live near open water, they're in a world of hurt relative to their swim train currently. But also, all of this is temporary for everyone. The clock, however, is ticking for the Olympians because they, unless they postpone it or kick it down the road, and as opposed to a cancellation, they're seeing this as it's going to happen in July. So I've got to get my training in now. It's one of the reasons why I'm sure you saw today that one of the members of the board of the I don't know if it was the International Olympic Committee recommended a postponement simply because the athletes couldn't train properly.
And you can't even have the trials. People need to be able to travel for their trials. Like, we're not going to have the Olympic trials, 20,000 people descending on Eugene if we have these mandatory closures. Right. So.
Yeah. And so I think practically and pragmatically, one could assume that it's not going to happen or that it's going to be postponed. I mean, I think that's a logical place to go. I'm big on rational thought and logical thought. I don't want somebody to be it's not going to happen. I think more like, hey, it could happen, but until it does happen, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think that this comes down to purpose, don't you think? A little, to a certain extent. If you're an athlete that has gotten to the level of being an Olympic hopeful, this is your purpose. Okay, this is why you get up every morning. You've lost a lot. You've lost, the sports that you love. You've lost the ability to go out and party with your friends. You've lost a lot. The one thing you haven't lost is your sense of purpose. So get your ass up. Look at what's written on the calendar by a coach. Get the best version of that workout you can. At least maintain that sense of purpose. That's one of the greatest gifts that a professional athlete will have, or an elite athlete has, is that sense of purpose each day. Don't lose that.
Yeah, I agree. That's well said, and I also believe that if you can only do half of your workout or the half of what you would like to be able to do because of some restriction that's been imposed on us societally or whatever, then put your energy at giving 100% for that 50% you can do, as opposed to letting the 50% that you can't influence what you can do.
A micro example of that. I remember we used to train in Flagstaff every April. And we'd always be like, well, should we keep going back to Flagstaff? It seems like every April, we get hit with some crazy storm. And we would. Sometimes a big blizzard would roll through. And for 2 or 3 days, we wouldn't be able to run. And we'd take what we had on the schedule and we'd say, what can we do? Okay, we can't do the track workout we wanted to because it's under 2 feet of snow. We can go and work out on the treadmill. We can swim laps. We can drive all the way down to Sedona and try to get something in there. Like, we would roll with the punches. And that is what a great athlete does. You have to be willing to roll with the punches. You have to be willing to try to find the best version of the situation that you can present for yourself.
I think, Nick, through this and I don't post that often. Recently I have been because I got more time on my hands, but somehow. But I recently posted something to the effect that what I really believe is that athletes are kind of uniquely qualified to manage this kind of a situation, because you all who train yourselves well are in solution mode all the time.
Yeah.
In adaptation, how do I make adjustments? Like, every single day becomes an opportunity to see what is, and then to adapt and adjust to that, to make the most out of ourselves in that day. And some days that feels like something's been taken away. How do we still find a solution? Some days something's been added. How do I take full advantage of it? And in this circumstance, again, this kind of bizarre and unique circumstance for all of us, I feel like if athletes really tap into that, which has helped them be great in the first place and has helped them become the athletes that they are, apply this to your life. We often talk about taking life lessons and applying them to sport. I think this is an opportunity for us to take our athlete training lessons and apply it to life.
Wow, that's great. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I know that for me, we practice a little bit of this attitude of gratitude every day, and I'm not trying to rub it in the face of the athletes that are still competing, because I just know how hard it must be. But I am so grateful that this is happening to me at 36, because I'm emotionally advanced enough, I guess, to deal with this. I wouldn't have been able to deal with this in my teens or my 20s. I would have really struggled with this. At 36, I've been through so many ups and downs. I can kind of brush it off a little bit better than I would have been able to when I was younger.
Yeah, and imagine getting to my age, and then
nothing phases Jeff Troesch.
No, I think what is also true, and I've heard this from several of my athletes, which has been great to hear them recognize this, is that for many of us, the darker times in our lives and the most challenging times in our lives have been the ones from which we have gotten the best growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that for me in my own personal life, that there have been moments in my life along the way, from teenage years through whatever, that shit happens, something that is traumatic, tragic, and the strength that we get from those broken places, the healing that comes from those broken places, the blossoms that come from the pruning, as it were, are often the things that are massively beneficial to our lives.
And I see that happen. They're often the things that stick with us the longest. I look back to that 2014 season, and if I look back on, I probably have run tens of thousands of miles, and I remember almost none of them. Maybe I remember, the Olympic trials went here, but very, very rarely do I look back and remember any training run in particular. But one sticks out in my mind so vividly, and it comes at the end of the summer in 2014, where I had gone through suicidal depression, to rehab, to finally at the end of summer running that first run again. And I look back on that moment, it just sticks in my mind so clear. I was out on the Prees Trail, and it was a walk a minute, jog a minute for 10 minutes. And I was probably 20 pounds overweight. I looked down at myself and saw my flabby tummy, and my legs had atrophied. And I just was so grateful to be able to walk a minute, jog a minute for 10 minutes. I did start crying. And I just, that was the beginning of me crawling out of that hole. And I would go on to win another U.S. title a year later. But it just sticks with me as we can get through anything. We don't have to shed the 20 pounds of weight today. We don't have to crawl out of this hole today. All we have to do is take one freaking step. And that's a start. That gets that snowball rolling downhill that will ultimately lead to, those great moments again.
Amen. Love it.
Nate, tee one up for us. I'm loving this, man. This is great.
A little more just running.
Okay. Natalie asks, I know you say that sometimes we should just run to run, but as an athlete, it's hard to stop thinking about hitting a pace goal or mileage goal. What do you recommend to get out of that mindset? A lot of times what I get questions of is, how do you stay motivated? And I'm great at finding motivation. I'm like, you need to sign up for a race. Go get yourself a GPS watch. You need to be accountable to your pace, your training. And now I'm almost preaching the exact opposite. I'm like, throw all that out the window. Right now, we just got to take it day by day. And sometimes just going for a run, leave the watch behind, forget about pace, forget about time, forget about distance. Just go for a run because you genuinely love running. It can be a really brutal transition and hard transition for some people. What do you have any words of advice or I think for me, I just have come to understand that exercise and running in particular, it helps me think clearer. It helps me be happier, have more energy throughout the day. But for a younger runner, maybe they haven't noticed, found the appreciation for that yet.
I think a couple things for me. One is, among my little Jeff philosophies, is that I don't think there's a right way to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there's an effective way, and so for this woman, for me, it's like, what if running with pace in mind is effective for her, and she
Mm-hmm.
gets satisfaction, and she feels as though that works for her, then great. If it's
Yeah.
I run because I love running, then great.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a right answer in that. I feel like what it comes down to is every runner figuring out for him or herself
What works in this new world of ours.
their why for being out there that day,
Yeah.
and making sure that what they're doing is effective to match their why, to match their purpose.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people get disconnected because they're out there thinking that they should be out here for a particular reason, or they should be out here doing something in a particular way, as opposed to like, what do you really want out here and why do you want that? Plugging into that and making sure that you stay consistent with that and disciplined to that, I think that helps us be more effective in satisfying whatever our why is.
I like that. And going back to finding that motivation,
Yeah.
maybe this is a great opportunity to try something new. And I really believe in trying different things, trying new things, and embracing new challenges. Maybe you've been training for a marathon and that marathon just got canceled. Well, go train for a mile. Train for a distance you've never run before. The feeling of setting a PR is so wonderful. It gives you so much motivation and sense of pride. Just try a new distance you've never run just for that moment, that a chance to try something different. Look at this as an opportunity to do that. That fitness isn't going anywhere. You can always get it back. Apply it to something new. And that's kind of what I had to do last summer. I wanted to run a marathon. It wasn't in the cards for me, for these old legs. So I tried the 100, and it was such a rewarding experience to just try something new.
Love it.
Nathan?
Love it.
We're going to get one from one of our ambassadors.
Oh,
here.
great. Okay. Cerebral palsy triumphs and struggles. Michael Freont says, "Hey, Nick, I am an ambassador for your company, and my first half marathon was canceled a week before, but I look at it as more time to improve myself and even do better when I finally have the opportunity." And that's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, that
Yes.
attitude of gratitude, that willingness to look for opportunities. I'm trying to keep saying this as eloquently as I can without trying to sound like some vulture capitalist, but there will be opportunities out there. There will be opportunities out there in business, opportunities to invest, opportunities to grow and to learn. And you have to just be constantly head on a swivel. Where are the opportunities? They will abound. I promise you, in every single crisis, in any single downturn, there are opportunities. I'm looking at them.
I guess,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say the one thing that I think is a constant is that there's an opportunity for everyone that's listening in here right now to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity there. Because I feel like for all of us, nearly everyone has more time on their hands now than they're used to.
Yeah.
And
what do we do with that now?
Yeah, well, exactly. And I feel like the potential benefit and value and the self-reflection, the kind of priority sorting, where have I been putting my time and energy? Like, how can I grow? How can I take this opportunity to learn more about myself and to grow? In this person's example, it's maybe, training more to become more fit or stronger relative to his race intentions. And it's also looking inward at, I think a lot of people that I've been in conversation with have been, this is an opportunity to kind of level set, like, have I been putting my time and energy at the things that I really do find most productive and most effective and most important in my life? And again, I think these kinds of moments when we're kind of hunkering down and kind of waiting for the storm to pass, metaphorically, provide a tremendous opportunity for self-reflection and opportunity for personal growth.
And along those lines, what a better way to grow than to continue to add knowledge. We spend so much time sifting through Instagram mindlessly or watching, silly stuff on YouTube. Make sure you check out my YouTube channel. But you've got to recognize that this is an opportunity to learn, right? And I had a video that came out today with my 5 favorite books on running. One of the reasons I am the runner today is because I studied the sport. So if you're sitting at home and you're bored out of your mind, download a book. Buy a book. Amazon will ship it to you in a day or two. Read a book. Study your sport. Whatever you're passionate about, you have the time now, the gift of free time to immerse yourself in something that you're passionate about.
Yep.
Hey, dog?
Right.
Lucas says, what do you recommend to do when I am in a slump? I feel like it is hard to have a good race after having multiple bad races in a row. This one's definitely you, Jeff.
Yeah, I guess it'd be interesting to be able to converse back and how does one define a slump, right? Because a slump typically refers to something related to outcome, and probably the number one answer when I'm asked the question, what's the most common issue for athletes? And the most common issue for athletes to me is they get too caught up in their outcomes, and we start defining our successes only on our outcomes. And there are successes in every race. There are successes in every training session. They may not necessarily reflect themselves in the stopwatch or in our race pace, but there are opportunities to gather, to learn from whatever is happening in the quote unquote slump, and apply those things to be better down the road. I'm a big believer in, and another thing that Nick and I we talked forever about, is I'm a big believer in the goal that I really care about, as you know, is the goal of just getting one day better every day. And that getting one day better doesn't necessarily mean that I just got faster. Sometimes it means I got wiser. I would hope every day it means I got wiser and I applied something that I learned today to my next opportunity. And so oftentimes we're defining slumps in race after race because I'm not finishing as I'm not finishing as far up the leaderboard as I'd like. I'm not finishing as fast as I'd like. But what I would suspect is that there are things that we could extract from those opportunities to learn about our training process, about how we're approaching the pre-race, how we're approaching things tactically, that we can then apply to the next opportunity. And so on the one hand, of course, we're going to be disappointed if we aren't getting the outcomes that we'd like. Again, I'm not trying to put a happy spin on outcomes that don't go well. But what I am saying is we don't want to let just the fact that our outcomes aren't going as well as we'd like to inhibit the potential benefits of learning what we can learn from those situations and apply those going forward.
Completely. And it's a great way to approach it mentally. From a physical standpoint, when I've had slumps or when I've had plateaus, there's a really famous saying, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, if it is broke, then do fix it. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it, all of a sudden you're going to break out of the slump. If you have a slump, if you have a bad season, if you have plateaued, it's time to try something new. And sometimes just adding in a new variable is enough to completely reshape your whole mindset and your physiology and bust out of that slump. So a good example of this is the first time I went to altitude. Completely changed my life. I actually credit that stint in Mexico my senior year with launching my professional career. I was in a slump. I was having trouble breaking through the 148 barrier, and it completely radically changed my life. It was something I needed to do. I could feel it deep in myself. I'm like, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm getting the same result. It's time to try something radically new. And as young athletes, you have the luxury of time to try things. So consider talking with your coach about that. If something's not working for you, and Jeff, I'm a big preacher of this. You are too. Have a really wonderful communication, open communication with your coach, and say, Coach, I got to try something new. And a good coach will listen to you and take that into consideration. Nathan, what are you at?
We're going to go from the young to a question from
Kathleen, great. Kathleen asks, I would love to hear ideas for older runners who are not necessarily athletes but increasing performance. That's a great question, and I feel like I am that guy. I'm constantly talking to 13-year-olds, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you because every single year, for the next few years, you're just going to get better and better and better. And now I'm on the back end of that, and I'm like, oh no, every year I'm just going to get slower and slower and slower. But it's not the case. Like I may not be able to run the 800 like I used to be able to, but I can bike way better than I used to. I can lift better than I used to. I think we have opportunities as we age to try different things and be maybe not the best that we would have ever been in our life for that particular event, but in this moment right now, because I neglected biking for the last 25 years, I can actually focus on learning a new skill and being great at something new. That's how I'm dealing with it. Jeff, how do you deal with, that we're all getting older and we're all having to try to
Yeah,
find motivation?
at the risk of sounding like it's the same answer for so many things, I so often come back to the why. Like,
Hmm.
why are you engaged in, fill in the blank, whether it's, you know, in the gym, on the bike, out running. And for some people wired like Nick Symmonds, you're out there because you like breaking records, you like
Yeah.
beating, you like beating times, you like doing things new that you can be good at.
Yeah.
For other people, and again, there's no right or wrong, there's no judgment in any of this, but knowing how you're wired and why you're doing what you're doing, there may be other people, they're doing it because it's a social engagement for them, and they really appreciate and enjoy having, just being with people who are like-minded or have similar interests, and doing it for that reason. And they're less inclined to push themselves to get better times, or things along those lines. So I feel like in the end, for people to give themselves the room and the space to be able to engage in whatever they like to do for their own reasons, and then find a way to make sure that that's happening on a consistent basis. Because quite frankly, if people who are, let's say, more relationally inclined, they might get a hard driving coach, or people are like, oh, you need to run faster, or you need to do more, and that may not be why I'm here in the
Yeah.
first place. Or there may be other people that I'm really about going out and getting faster, and like, well, why don't you get a group and run with other people? I don't really want to run with other people, I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the right answer there? Who's right, who's wrong, what's good, what's bad? It's like, what works for you,
That's right.
figure out what's
Yeah.
effective for you, and then engage in that, and stick to that.
Well, I got a question for you, Jeff. It strikes me constantly you're saying what's right for you, and you understand that so many athletes are motivated by different things and beat to a different drum. How is it? Do you have like types of athletes that oh, I got a type 1 or a type 2, and do you kind of categorize them? Or are you trying to really take each athlete? And I've asked this because when we actually met, I was dating a girl who was vastly different than me in terms of motivation. She loved to
Yes.
train and hated to compete. I hated training and loved to compete, and yet you were still able to connect with us really, really well. How do you deal with different types of personalities like that, or identify them in the
Yeah.
first place?
Well, I mean, honestly, at the risk of sounding immodest, 32 years of doing this for a living,
Yeah.
if it walks and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, and if it's
This isn't your
barks,
first rodeo.
like, yeah, it's like, so part of it is that,
Yeah.
and I mean, honestly, that's a piece of what it is. I actually have, uh, recently, and now I'm deeply entrenched in using the disc profile. I don't know if you're familiar with the disc profile. I don't think
Mm,
that we ever did it, but it's a online behavior assessment. It's
mm.
a incredibly reliable and valid instrument, and it gives us some really excellent information about what an athlete's behavioral tendencies are. Are you more
Interesting.
task oriented? Are you more relationship oriented? Are you somebody are you more impulsive? Are you more a brake tapper instead of a
Hmm.
gas goer? So for me, the combination of, if you're just asking about my involvement, that the connection, the connect between having valid, concrete, objective data, along with my own work, and having been around so many athletes for so many years. And then it's a matter of me meeting them with where they are,
Hmm.
and helping them become clear about what their real needs and desires are, as opposed to so many athletes who are doing things for reasons that they think are their own, until we get in and do the work, and we kind of
Yeah.
scrape the layers off of it. Like, is that really you, or was that mom and dad? Is that really you? Is that a
Yeah.
coach? Is that really you? Is that whose voice is that really? And then
Yeah.
to get down to who your essence is and why you really want to do it, that can be very obvious to some people, and really hard work for others.
Are there types of athletes that you would say you're better with, or types of athletes that you struggle with, or that having 32 years of experience, you feel like
Yeah.
you got it figured out? I mean,
Yeah, I can go across the board. I mean, I feel well about just about any athlete. I think the ones, and this may be too obvious, but I think the ones that I struggle with are the ones who are not willing to do the work of
mm,
self-reflection.
yeah,
And they're really looking for somebody to validate their own perception of themselves
yeah,
already, and really aren't real. I think it would be the same answer to a coach who's teaching, a training coach. It's like, I can educate somebody and give them training opportunities, but if they're not really willing to do the real work, then and I can work with those people, but it's just not going to be very effective. But for the people who are really willing to do the work and dig in and really look at their truths
Yeah.
and validate what's going on, it's pretty much everyone else other than those that aren't willing to do the work.
I said this in my new book, that being the kind of person that is willing to do the work, is willing to work hard, that is a type of talent, and if you have that ingrained talent, or are willing to develop that talent, there is no shortage of coaches or sports psychologists or mentors that will want to work with you. People love helping, and we just all that we ask in return is that you do the work. So keep that in mind out there, all you young athletes that aspire to be great. There are so many people and so many entities that will throw resources at you to help you achieve your dreams. All you have to do is show up and do the work.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, I'm laughing just because how many people, like aspiring sports psychologists, reach out to me, or athletes or whatever, in terms of like how do I break through these barriers to entry? How do I get in? And what you just said is exactly what I say to them, which is if you show up on time and you actually do the work and you work your butt off,
Yeah.
you're gonna there's
You're going to
plenty of
beat
room
at least
to be
50%
successful.
of people out there just by being on time.
Exactly. And it's a sad reality that a lot of people want to be great, but they're not willing to do anything close to what it takes to be great.
Here's
Again, show up and work their ass off.
Here's a story for my listeners and followers, and I'll bare my soul a little bit here. When I was finishing up my track career, I had a call with Jeff, and I probably was crying. I don't remember. I was definitely scared. And I said to you, Jeff, I said, I've only made money one way. Like for my entire life, I made money running around in circles. What if I can't make money after I retire? And you just laughed and you said, Nick, if there's one thing I know about you, you're the guy that shows up and works hard. And there's so few people in this world that are willing to do that, that you're going to be successful just by the nature of that is who you are. And so I think this is a lesson for people on the track, in life, and in anything, whether it's a relationship or anything. If you show up and you do the work, you're going to be successful, or at least you put yourself out there to set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've tremendously increased the likelihood, and you've
Completely.
increased your odds significantly. That's all we can do. There's no guarantee of anything for anything, but all we can do is just work our butts off and in a timely fashion.
What's the great meme is like, it's so strange. The harder I work, the luckier I get. you know?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Nate Dogg, you got one more for us? Let's see. Natalie asked, during my cross-country season, my anxiety before a race would get so bad that I would usually throw up before the race. What do you recommend to do to calm these nerves? And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. I'll mention just from an athlete standpoint, I used to feel that too. And I think having a mantra can help. My coach Roland, would say, when you're on the starting line and your heart's just beating through your chest, or you're lying there, visualizing the race and you feel like you're going to throw up, he would just say really calmly in this British accent, breathe in energy, breathe out relaxation. And I would do that. I would just simply say there, breathe in energy, breathe out relaxation. And that would kind of calm me down. I think having little tricks like that can help it. I know you must have a whole golf bag full of clubs here. What kind of tricks can you use?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you just articulated is a good one. I mean, having some kind of breathing exercise, some kind of relaxation technique of some kind, like pre-performance, certainly can be beneficial for athletes who are over anxious. As I said, a bit ago in this podcast, that our thoughts typically generate our emotions. And so if this woman is anxious pre cross country performance, it is likely that she's talked herself into some sense of anxiety relative to what she believes her performance has to be, or what she's worried might not happen in the performance, or something along those lines. So for her to dig into what kind of messaging is she giving to herself? What's her self-talk like largely in the days, probably in hours or minutes leading up to the performance itself. What happens often with competitively anxious athletes is often once they actually start doing what they do, they're fine, or they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this anticipatory anxiety of things might not go well, or I'm worried that I might not have the resources available within me to be successful today. That kind of self-talk stuff can use some significant work on messaging differently, speaking to oneself differently, reframing how I'm looking at it. How am I measuring my success? How can I create different kinds of success criteria than what I have in front of me now? So from a cognitive mental perspective, there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of restructuring the ways that she's looking at her performance.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of it is the physiological side, which you spoke to, which is doing some breathing training, relaxation, etc. From an imagery perspective, one thing that I will say is a distinction between some athletes who, and I know that you used your imagery in a way that worked for you in terms of future imagery of seeing yourself be successful in races. For some athletes, actually, that creates a little bit of anxiety because they
what
start
if I can't
seeing
live up to
themselves
that?
perform.
Yeah.
What if I live up to it, or they see themselves performing poorly? But what every athlete has is a highlight film that they could play in their own head about the successes that they've had.
Yeah.
And so what happens sometimes to what can happen and be helpful with some athletes is for, as an example, this woman is to replay successes that she's had, replay training runs that have felt good, replay races that have gone well, and at the end of the day, in injecting in her, basically filling up her confidence bank of those reminders of gathered evidence that I've prepared myself well, and I've been successful previously. That can sometimes help us manage our anxiety as well.
Yeah, and I like that you touched on visualizing success, and that always came really well. It came easily to me. One thing that was really hard for me was when I visualized, bad things happening. And
Right.
once, it's so funny. It's literally like a tiny little seed of doubt that would plant itself in my brain, and every day it would just kind of like grow and grow and grow until it took over my entire consciousness. And I'd be like, but what if this? But what if this? But what if this? And you were so good at just stomping it down. And it was just one phrase that you would always say: what if your worrying about this hypothetical situation is actually what does you in? Is it more likely that you are going to self-sabotage yourself than that unlikely event is actually going to occur? And throwing it back to a real-world example, 2012 Olympic Games, I had gotten through the prelims and I was into the semifinals. And due to a unfortunate event in the prelims, two people that had gotten tripped advanced on a bye, and they got thrown into my heat. So what was supposed to be a heat of 8 was now a heat of 10. And I lost my shit. I was in London, so I was calling you. I'm sure it was like 3 a.m. your time. And I was manic, or like just freaking out. Jeff, this is so unfair. I can't deal with how unfair this is. I was only supposed to have 8, and now I have to race 2 extra people to try to get into the finals. And Marcin, the Polish guy's in it. He runs just like me, and he's going to be elbowing me the whole time. And you were like, whoa, you need to slow down just real quick. And I was losing it. And you said, what's more likely to happen? That somebody's going to get in your way, or Marcin's going to elbow you, or somebody's going to get tripped, or that you are going to beat yourself right now in this moment worrying about it because you're not going to get a good night's sleep over this. And I'm like, wow, it's really true. And it just calmed me down. And I think it's so applicable for where we are at right now. It is so easy to say, well, what if this happens? What if the supply chain stops and we can't get our grocery? What if I can't wipe my butt because there's no toilet paper out there? Like, it's so easy to walk down that path and start spiraling downward. And I think that we run the risk of self-sabotaging before any of these low probability scenarios ever materialize.
Right. Yeah, fearful thinking is what generates the highest likelihood that we're going to manifest what we fear.
Yeah.
Right. And that doesn't mean, put your head in the sand and pretend everything's going to be awesome. I'm not that guy, as you know.
Yeah.
But because I'm more of a realist and more of a pragmatist than that. But it is true that if we put too much energy at what we're worrying about might happen down the road, it increases the likelihood it happens, because we
self-fulfilling prophecy
behaviors now, right? So So yeah, it's like, yeah, be aware and make good decisions, and take due caution and those kinds of things. But the other side of it is that if our reactions to those things become too manic or over the top, then our, as has happened here, our grocery stores
Yeah.
shelves are wiped out, and
Yeah.
now people have got more food than they know what to do with for the next
Yeah, exactly.
however long. They get a mountain of toilet paper in our
Yeah.
neighbor's house over there, whatever. It's insane.
I'll leave everybody with this because it's been helping me so much through all this and helped me through my career. We don't have a problem until we have a problem, right? I'm not going to
Exactly.
create a problem up here until I have a problem right in front of me that I need to deal with. And it's been helping me a lot lately. So, Jeff, that's just one of many nuggets of wisdoms you have taught me over the years. I hope that our listeners were able to take some of this and apply it both to their lives, both on the track and off the track. Jeff, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I think, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to get in front of you and your people. I think there's a gift in this situation that we're in right now if we choose to open it. And for me, the gift is that we've said 3 or 4 times in this, the attitude of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one thing is when people return back to whatever the new normal is, that people they have the potential to really value and appreciate more the things that maybe we took for granted. And I feel like that has the potential to be rolled into something really significant and really good for us individually and collectively.
I love it. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. If people want to get in touch with you, I know you're on Instagram at Jeff Troesch. Any other way that they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. My email is my first and last name at gmail.com, jefftroesch@gmail.com. The easiest way to catch me.
I think you're
Appreciate
gonna
it, man.
get inundated with emails now, my man.
Good. Awesome.
Jeff, thank you so
Oh,
much. I mean, I'm just so appreciative for everything you've done for me and everything that you've done for our listeners.
you bet. Thanks, Nick.
Talk
Appreciate it.
soon.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that.